From now on, your paycheck will be transferred into my account. You don't need anything anyway, my son Ryan said. I just stared at him, my heart turning to ice, and I quietly agreed. That night, he and his wife Stacy came over for their usual free dinner, expecting me to be waiting like a faithful old dog. But when they walked in, they screamed in absolute shock. Because, before I tell you exactly what they saw and what I did next, I need to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments below. If you have ever felt taken for granted, or if you've ever had to fight for your own home, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means more to me than you know. My name is Martin. I am 70 years old. And 6 months ago, I buried my wife. I was standing right here in my own kitchen, in the house I built with my own 2 hands nearly 40 years ago. I was looking out the window at the garden. The roses were blooming, but my wife Diane wasn't here to see them. It's been 6 long, silent months since the cancer took her. The silence in this house is the loudest sound I know. It's a heavy, suffocating blanket, and I was just trying to find a way to breathe underneath it. The silence was broken by my son Ryan. He's 42, but he still carries the entitlement of a teenager. He and his wife Stacy cornered me by the refrigerator. They had that look they get, the one that means they want something. Ryan cleared his throat, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Stacy and I have been talking. Things are tight right now. Really tight." I almost laughed. Their things were tight, and I looked around my kitchen. They lived here in my house completely rent-free. They ate my food. They used my utilities. I paid for the internet they used to stream movies all day. "So," he continued, "we've decided, from now on your pension and that paycheck from your little consulting job need to be transferred directly into our joint account." I didn't even have time to process the sheer breathtaking nerve of it before Stacy chimed in. She's 40, sharp-faced, with eyes that always look like they're calculating. "He's right, Martin," she said, calling me by my first name like I was her employee, not the man who owned the roof over her head. "It just makes sense. Besides, you don't need anything anyway. You just sit around this house all day." You don't need anything anyway. The words hit me harder than a physical slap. I looked past them at the framed photo of Diane on the mantelpiece, her smile still so bright. 6 months. 6 months since I held her hand as she slipped away, and this is what they were focused on. This is what my grief meant to them. An opportunity. Sit around all day. I am Martin Vance. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I didn't just work, I built things that lasted. I designed the foundations for the new city library, the Overbrook Bridge. I ran my own firm for 3 decades, managing budgets in the tens of millions and a staff of 50. I retired 5 years ago, not because I couldn't work, but because Diane started to get weak. I retired to become her full-time caregiver, to make her last years comfortable, to hold her hand and read to her. That little consulting job they mentioned, I took it after she passed. The silence in this house was deafening. I needed a reason to get out of bed. I needed to use my mind, or I'd lose it. The paycheck was just a bonus they had apparently noticed. And Ryan, my son. He and Stacy had moved in 3 years ago. "Just for a few months, Dad," Ryan had said, his eyes downcast. "Just until I get back on my feet." That was 3 years and 4 almost jobs ago. They lived in my guest wing. They treated my home like a hotel where the bill was never due. They were parasites, and I had been too lost in my grief over Diane, too broken to realize how deeply they had latched on. They weren't just asking for the paycheck. They were seizing control. This was a hostile, takeover of my life. And they were using my love for Diane, my grief, as their leverage. They expected me to be a broken, confused old man who would just hand everything over. In that moment, standing in the kitchen, Diane loved something inside me shifted. The fog of grief didn't disappear, but a cold, hard anger cut right through it. They had miscalculated. They thought I was done. They forgot who I was. I let my shoulders slump. I made my voice sound tired, thin. "A joint account?" I said, shaking my head slightly. "Oh, Ryan, I don't know. I'm not good with all that banking. It sounds complicated. My pension already pays the bills just fine." Stacy let out a little sigh, the kind someone makes when they are dealing with a difficult child, not a 70-year-old man. She stepped forward and put her hand on my arm. Her nails were perfectly manicured, a bright chemical red. I wondered if she'd used my credit card for that too. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We know you do, but we're just trying to help you." She squeezed my arm. Ever since Diane passed, you've just been so forgetful. You know you have." I just looked at her, forgetful. "You forgot to pay the electric bill last week," she said, nodding, as if sharing a sad, unavoidable truth. The power company sent a final notice. Ryan had to call them and sort it out. It was a whole big mess. Ryan nodded gravely from beside her. "We don't want you stressing about these things, Dad. And honestly, we're worried you'll get scammed. You read those articles all the time. Scammers target seniors online. They're very sophisticated. They could wipe out your whole account before you even realize what's happened." Stacy picked up the thread. "Exactly. Think of us as your financial bodyguards. We're just protecting what's yours, what's ours as a family. Forgetful, I'm the man who designed the foundations for 3 bridges in this state. My entire life, my entire 40-year career was built on precision, on remembering details, on numbers. My mind was a steel trap. I retired to care for Diane, not because my brain gave out. I remembered every prescription, every doctor's appointment, every single meal I cooked for her. I remembered the electric bill. I knew with absolute certainty that I had not forgotten it. I had set up autopay from my checking account for all the utilities 2 years ago, specifically, so Diane wouldn't have to worry. I remembered seeing the email confirmation from Duke Energy just last Tuesday. It was paid. They were lying. They were standing in my kitchen looking at me with these fake, pitying eyes and telling me a bald-faced lie. This wasn't a mistake on their part. This was a calculated move, a test. They were building a case against my mind, creating a narrative of the confused old man to justify what they really wanted. My money. All of it. This was theater, and in that second I decided I would play my part. I let my gaze drift. I looked down at my hands, made them tremble just a little. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I looked back up at Stacy, trying to appear confused, lost. "Oh," I said. My voice was just a whisper. I don't remember that. The electric bill." I shook my head. I thought I paid that one." Stacy's smile tightened with victory. She thought she had me. "See," she said softly, patting my arm again as if I were a dog. "It's okay. It's not your fault. You've just got too much on your mind. You're grieving." She used my grief, my love for Diane, as her weapon. That was the part that made the cold anger in my chest burn hotter. Ryan stepped in, playing the role of the dutiful son taking charge. He put a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. That's why we're here. This is why we need to do this. It's for your own good." He sounded so reasonable. Anyone listening would have thought he was a saint burdened with a senile father. "So," he said, his voice becoming brisk, all business. "Just call your old firm on Monday. Call Social Security, too. Tell them you're changing your direct deposit information. We set up a new joint checking account this morning. I wrote the account and routing numbers down for you." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and set it on the counter. Just like that. They had already set up the account. They had been planning this for weeks. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. This was an invasion. You just read them the numbers, Dad. It's easy, he said. We'll handle the rest. We'll make sure all the bills are paid from now on. You won't have to worry about a thing. I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, playing the part of the defeated old man. Okay, Ryan, I mumbled. If you think it's best. We do, Stacy said, smiling brightly now. Her victory was complete. This is so much better. You'll see. Ryan gave my shoulder a final patronizing squeeze. Great. Well, that's settled. We'll see you tonight then. We'll come over for dinner around 7. Stacy's gonna make that chicken you like. I just nodded again. He meant I would be buying the chicken and I would be cooking it. Or maybe they'd just order takeout and use my card. It didn't matter. See you then, Dad, Ryan said. They walked out the front door, victorious. I watched through the window as they got into their BMW, the car I was still making payments on, and drove away. They were probably laughing, congratulating each other on how easy it had been to fool the clueless old man. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen until their car was long gone. Then I turned and looked at the piece of paper on my counter with the new bank account numbers. I picked it up and my hand wasn't shaking anymore. Forgetful, I said to the empty room. I'll show you forgetful. They thought I was weak. They thought I was beaten. They had no idea what they had just started. They wanted my paycheck. They wanted to bleed me dry while I sat in the house Diane and I built. They thought I had nowhere to go. They thought I had no one else. They were wrong. I walked into my office, the one room in the house they never entered, and I locked the door. I didn't call my old firm. I didn't call Social Security. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, a number that wasn't Ryan's or Stacy's. Maria, I said. It's Martin. Yes, I'm okay. Listen, I need your help. You remember that development company, the one that wanted to buy my land? I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time. The silence they left behind was different from the silence of my grief. It was cold, calculating. I picked up the piece of paper with the bank account numbers and folded it neatly, slipping it into my shirt pocket. The act of playing the frail, confused old man had left a bitter taste in my mouth, but my mind was clear, sharp as a piece of cut steel. My weakness was gone. In its place was a cold, quiet rage. They thought I was senile. They thought grief had turned my brain to mush. They were testing me, pushing to see how weak I was, how much they could take before I broke. Stacy's fake sympathy, Ryan's patronizing pat on my shoulder. It was all an act. This wasn't the first time. My gut had been screaming at me for months, but I had been too busy drowning in sorrow to listen. Now I was wide awake. I remembered last week. I was walking down the hall toward my office. Their bedroom door was ajar, just enough for me to hear Stacy's voice. She was on the phone laughing with one of her friends. I heard my name, so I stopped. "Oh, Martin," she said, and her laugh was like glass breaking. "He's fine. He's just there. He's like breathing furniture. Honestly, as long as he's useful and pays the bills, it's fine. We just have to wait him out." Breathing furniture. That's what I was to her. Not a father-in-law. Not the man who owned the house she lived in for free. Just a piece of old furniture that still had a pulse and a bank account. I stood there, invisible in my own hallway, and just walked away. What was I supposed to say? And Ryan, my son. Last month he came to me in a panic. "Dad, the brakes on the BMW are shot. The mechanic said it's an emergency, totally unsafe to drive. I don't get paid till next week. Can I please borrow your credit card? I swear I'll pay you back." I saw the fear in his eyes, the urgency. What father says no to that? I gave him the card. 2 days later, a receipt arrived in my email. $2,000. Not from a mechanic's shop. From Best Buy. The charge was for an 80-inch 4K television. The same television that now hangs on my living room wall, the one they watch all day. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged. Oh, the breaks were only minor, Dad. And this was on a no-interest plan. It's a family TV. You watch it too, right? I hadn't turned it on once. But the worst part, the part that settles in my stomach, like lead, was from Diane's last days. The hospice bed was set up right here in the living room, where she could see her garden. The house was quiet, filled with the sterile, sweet smell of medicine and sickness. I was sitting by her bed, holding her hand, when Stacy walked in. She fanned the air in front of her face. Ugh, she muttered, not quietly enough. It smells like a hospital in here. It's making me sick. I wanted to throw her out, but Diane squeezed my hand, a weak, trembling pressure. Let it go, she whispered. So I did. 2 days later, just 48 hours before Diane breathed her last, Ryan found me in the kitchen. He put his arm around me. Dad, he said, his voice low and serious. I know this is hard, but we need to be practical. Mom's jewelry, especially that diamond necklace Grandma gave her. Have you thought about where it is? We should probably get it appraised. You know, for insurance, just to... No. He was asking to divide her spoils before she was even gone. He was looking at his dying mother and seeing a price tag. I stood there in the kitchen, the memory so vivid, it made me nauseous. My gut feeling wasn't just a feeling, it was a certainty. This demand for my paycheck wasn't about helping me. It wasn't about forgetfulness. This was the next logical step in their hostile takeover. They had my house. They had my credit cards. Now they wanted my income. And when that wasn't enough, they would find a way to take the rest. They would take the house. They would declare me incompetent, just like Stacy had lied about the electric bill. They were going to strip me bare just like they wanted to strip Diane of her jewelry. I will not let that happen. Not in this house, not while I still have breath in my body. Diane told me to be strong. It was time. They wanted me to be a clueless old man. Fine. But they forgot one thing. This clueless old man built an empire from nothing, and I know exactly how to protect it. I watched their BMW speed down the driveway, the tires spitting gravel, kicking up dust from the path I'd laid myself. The moment the car turned the corner and disappeared from view, the fog of the confused old man vanished. I didn't walk. I moved. I went straight to my study. It was the one room in this 40-year-old house they never entered. It was too full of my engineering textbooks, my structural blueprints, boring old man stuff, as Stacy had called it once. It was my sanctuary, and it was the only room that still smelled like me, like old paper and pipe tobacco, not their cheap scented candles. I closed the heavy oak door and I turned the deadbolt. The click of the lock was loud in the quiet house. It was the sound of a decision being made. I sat down at the heavy mahogany desk my father gave me when I got my license. The piece of paper with Ryan's new bank account numbers was still in my pocket. I took it out. I looked at the routing number, the account number, all set up to drain me dry. I slowly crumpled it into a tight, hard ball and threw it into the wastebasket. I would not be calling Social Security. I would not be calling my consulting firm to redirect my little paycheck. My hands were perfectly steady. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. She answered on the second ring. Maria Sanchez Realty, this is Maria. Her voice was crisp, professional, energetic. Maria, I said. It's Martin. Her voice changed instantly, softening with genuine warmth. Martin. Honey, how are you? I was just thinking about you. I was going to call, see if you wanted to get some coffee this week. Maria Sanchez wasn't just my realtor. She and Diane had been best friends for 30 years. They were in the same gardening club. They fought over books in the same book club. Maria sat with me in that sterile hospital room for the last 48 hours, holding Diane's other hand. She knew everything. She knew Ryan's long history of almost jobs and failed ventures. She had seen with her own sharp eyes how Stacy had treated Diane near the end. Maria despised them both with a quiet, polite fury that only a true Southern woman can properly manage. "I'm okay, Maria," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. I'm actually clearer than I have been in months." She paused. "You sound different, Martin. You sound strong." "I am," I said. "Listen, I don't have a lot of time and I need your help. This is professional, and it is urgent." "Anything, Martin. You name it. What did those two leeches do now?" I smiled. No beating around the bush with Maria. They just demanded I sign over my pension and my paycheck to a joint account they control. They told me I'm forgetful and don't need anything anyway. The silence on the other end was heavy. When she spoke, her voice was low and it was dangerous. "That vulture. That ungrateful. Okay. Okay. What do you need, Martin? You want me to find you a lawyer for elder abuse? I know a guy. He's a shark. He'd eat them alive." "I appreciate that, Maria, but I'm handling the legal side. I need you. I need the realtor. You remember that offer, the big one, from that development company in Atlanta, the one that wanted to buy my land for condominiums?" I heard a sharp intake of breath. "The $3.2 million one. Of course I remember. You told them to go to hell in no uncertain terms. You said they'd have to bulldoze you first." I looked out my office window past the desk to the 2 acres of land stretching out behind the house. Diane's garden. "I told them that," I said quietly, "because Diane was alive. She loved this garden. She loved that old oak tree by the driveway. I couldn't sell her memories, Maria. I couldn't." "I know, honey, I know. Well, she's gone. And the people who are left, they're just waiting. They're waiting for me to die so they can cash in on the land they never once helped maintain." "So what are you saying, Martin?" "I'm saying is that $3.2 million offer still valid? Are they still interested?" I heard the furious click-clack of her computer keyboard. "Interested, Martin, they call me once a month. This plot is the last double-acre lot in this zip code. They want it badly. The offer isn't just valid, it's probably higher now. I bet I could get them up to 3.5, maybe 3.7. Let me call them, I can." "No," I interrupted. My voice was firm. It was the voice I used to use in boardrooms. "No negotiations. I don't want a bidding war. I don't want this to take weeks. I want the original offer, $3.2 million, all cash, but I want it today." "Martin, today a commercial property close is complicated. It takes weeks. We need title searches, inspections, escrow. They've inspected this property 3 times in the last 2 years," I said, cutting her off. "They know the title is clean. They've been trying to buy it for 24 months. I'm giving them what they want. You call them right now. You tell them they get the original $3.2 million price if they can close by 5 p.m. today." That's insane, Martin." She was quiet for a second. "But it might just work. They want it that badly, they just might break every rule to get it done." "Good," I said. "That's what I'm counting on. I need you here in 1 hour, Maria. Bring the documents. Bring a mobile notary. Bring the buyer if you have to. Bring whoever you need to make this legal and binding. I want this done by 5 o'clock. I want to be out of this house by sunset." "My God, Martin, you're not kidding." "No, I'm not." "Okay," she said, her voice all business again. "I'm on it. I'll make the calls. I'll be there, but... Martin, where will you go?" "I have a place," I said, looking at a set of keys on my desk that Ryan and Stacy had never even known existed. "I have a place. I'll be there, Martin. I am on my way." Maria's voice was pure steel. I hung up. I knew she would move heaven and earth. She hated them almost as much as I was starting to. But my plan was not complete. I had a way to get my money. Now I needed a place to go. I looked at my contacts and dialed the second most important number on my list. Michael Foster, my lawyer for 30 years. He wasn't just the man who drafted my business contracts. He was the executor of Diane's will. A man who knew every dime I had and every battle I'd fought. He answered on the first ring. Michael Martin Vance. Martin, it's good to hear your voice, though. I wish it were under better circumstances. How are you holding up? His voice was always kind, professional, measured. I'm managing, Michael. Listen, I need some information, and it is time sensitive, and it is confidential. Absolutely confidential. Of course, Martin. Attorney-client privilege is absolute. What's on your mind? Here it was. The part that Ryan and Stacy and all their arrogant, self-absorbed greed had never even considered. They saw me as this house. They thought I was a fixed object, the breathing furniture stuck in one spot. They rummaged through Diane's jewelry and eyed my credit card statements, but they never once bothered to look at my actual portfolio. They didn't know that 10 years ago, when my engineering firm landed that massive stadium contract, Diane and I had taken a significant portion of the profits. We didn't buy a boat or a new car. We bought property. Michael, I said, the house on Elm Street, the little 2-bedroom bungalow. There was a brief pause. Elm Street. The rental property. Yes, of course, I remember it. What about it? I need to know the status of the deed, right now. I know Diane and I were both on it. What happened to the title after? After she passed? Ah, Michael said, and I could hear the faint clicking of his keyboard. Right here. You were listed as joint tenants with right of survivorship. The moment she passed, Martin ownership transferred entirely to you. It's solely yours. It bypassed probate completely. It's as clean as a whistle. Why? I felt a wave of relief so strong I had to sit down in my desk chair. It was my safe house. We had rented it out for years to a nice young couple, a teacher and a firefighter. But their lease had expired 6 months ago, right before Diane took her final turn for the worse. I remember telling her I'd have Maria find a new tenant. But Diane, frail as she was, her voice thin as paper, had put her hand on my arm. Martin, she'd whispered, let's just keep it empty for a while. Just in case, you just never know. It was almost as if she knew, as if she had seen the vultures circling, as if she knew they would eventually turn on me and that I would need a place to land. You just never know. Michael, I said, my voice hardening, I need to be 100% certain, Ryan or Stacy. Did I ever, in a moment of weakness or stupidity or holiday generosity, add their names to that deed? More clicking. No, absolutely not. The title is clean. It's just you, Martin. Why are you asking? Are they trying to make a claim on it? They're trying to make a claim on everything, I said flatly. They just stood in my kitchen and demanded I sign over my pension and my salary to a joint account they set up this morning. What? Michael's voice was no longer the calm lawyer. It was the angry friend. They what, Martin? That is textbook elder financial abuse. We can file a report with the state. We can get an immediate restraining order. No, I said, cutting him off. No police, no messy reports. Not yet. I'm handling this my own way, Diane's way. Clean, final. But I need you to do something for me, Michael. This is the second reason I'm calling. Name it. I'm selling the main house, the big one, today. Michael was smart. He didn't gasp or ask if I was sure. He just processed the information. Okay, how much? 3.2 million, all cash. It's closing by 5 p.m. My God, Martin, that's fast. It has to be. Now that money, I do not want it going anywhere near my standard checking account. I don't want Ryan or Stacy to ever be able to smell it, let alone touch it. I need you to immediately draft the paperwork for an irrevocable trust. The tightest, most bulletproof trust you can write. An irrevocable trust, yes. Who are the beneficiaries? Me, I said. Only me. And the trustee who manages the funds. Me. Only me. I want that $3.2 million locked in a legal vault that only I have the key to. Can you get that structure set up and ready to receive a wire transfer by tomorrow morning? Martin, he said, and I could almost hear him smile. For you, I'll have it drafted and filed in the next hour. Good. I'm sending Maria Sanchez to your office with the signed sales agreement before the end of the day. The money is to go directly from the buyer, through escrow, and into that new trust. Understood? Perfectly, Michael said. There was a new respect in his voice. Martin, be careful. I'm just getting started, I said, and I hung up the phone. I looked around my office, my prison, not for much longer. They thought they were taking my paycheck. I was taking my life back. I had a place to go. Now I just needed to move my things. I hung up with Michael. My plan was now in motion. I had a buyer for the prison. I had a safe house for my escape. Now I just needed to move my things, and theirs. I dialed the third and final number. I'd seen their trucks in the nice parts of Charlotte, the ones with the elegant gold lettering on a clean white truck. Prestige movers, the woman's voice answered. White glove services. Yes, I said, my voice all business. I have an emergency move. I need a team at my address in South Charlotte within the hour. I understand this is a rush job. I will pay double your standard rate. Cash. The woman paused, surprised by the urgency, but not the money. Within the hour, sir, that's a very tight window. What exactly does the job entail? It's 2 separate jobs and I need 2 separate teams, I said, looking out my office door. First, I need a professional white glove team. 2 men. Careful packers. They will be handling antiques, books, and artwork. They will be packing 2 specific rooms, my master bedroom and this office. They will be moving these items to a second nearby location. Okay, sir. And the second job? For the second job, I said, my voice hardening. I don't need white glove. I just need 2 strong backs. And I need you to rent on my behalf the largest U-Haul truck you can find. A 26-footer. I want that truck parked in my driveway, and I want your 2 men to take everything else in this house and put it in the back of it. Everything else, sir? She asked, a note of confusion in her voice. Furnishings from which rooms? All of them, I said. The living room, the guest wing bedrooms, the kitchen appliances, the dining room, everything. Whatever is not in my office or my bedroom gets loaded into that U-Haul. I don't care how you pack it. Just get it out. She was quiet for a beat. Sir, that sounds complicated. Is this part of a divorce proceeding? We often need authorization. This is part of a spring cleaning, I said, cutting her off. I am the sole owner of this property. My name is Martin Vance. You can check the county records. I am paying for this service. Can you do it, or do I need to call someone else? No, sir, Mr. Vance. We can do it. A 2-man white glove team for the personal items and a 2-man standard team with a U-Haul rental for the spring cleaning. We can have them both there by 3 p.m. Perfect, I said. Send me the bill. I hung up on 3 p.m. That gave me just enough time before Maria arrived with the closing papers. It would be a very, very busy afternoon. I walked out of my study and stood in the living room. My living room. I looked at that absurd 80-inch television. It dominated the wall, a giant black hole of plastic and glass. Ryan had told me it was a family gift, a gift he bought with my credit card. I looked at his video game console next to it, the stack of games with violent, colorful covers. I looked at the plush sectional sofa they'd ordered online again, with my card, because the one Diane and I had picked out 20 years ago was too lumpy. I walked to the front door, and there it was, Stacy's collection. At least a dozen pairs of expensive sneakers, brightly colored Nikes, those absurd Yeezy things, shoes that cost $300, $400 a pair, all bought while she complained about the smell of sickness in the house. All bought while her husband, my son, told me I was the one wasting money. I remembered it clearly. It was just last week. I was sitting at the kitchen table tying my old New Balance sneakers. They were comfortable, but the sole on the left one was starting to come loose. I suppose I need a new pair of walking shoes, I'd said mostly to myself. Ryan heard me from the living room. He laughed, that short barking laugh of his. "A waste of money, Dad," he called out. His eyes glued to the giant TV. "You don't go anywhere. You just sit here." I looked down at the pile of Stacy's ridiculous, expensive shoes. I thought about Ryan's words. "You don't go anywhere." He was right. I hadn't gone anywhere. I had been a prisoner in my own home, trapped by my grief and by their greed. "Well," I whispered to the empty room, looking at the mountain of their possessions, "I might not go anywhere, but all of this is about to." I heard the rumble of a diesel engine outside. I looked through the window. A large, white, immaculately clean truck from Prestige Movers was pulling into my driveway. Right behind it, like a shark following a pilot fish, was the bright orange 26-foot U-Haul. And just behind that, Maria Sanchez's black Mercedes pulled up. It was 3 p.m. The cavalry had arrived. Maria was out of her Mercedes before the engine was even off. She moved with the energy of a woman half her age, her heels clicking fast on my driveway. She was followed by 2 men in dark suits. One I recognized as Mr. Harrison, the developer's agent, and the other carried a heavy leather briefcase. He had the unmistakable look of a notary, a man paid to make things final. The moving supervisors, seeing her authoritative approach, paused and looked to me. I gave them a nod. Harrison, the agent, looked around the 2-acre lot, his eyes practically gleaming. He knew he was getting a prime piece of real estate, the last of its kind in this neighborhood. He was getting it for the original $3.2 million offer, not a penny more, but he was getting it today. While the notary began setting up a portable table and his embossed stamp right there on my front porch, a strange, surreal sight, Maria grabbed my elbow. She pulled me aside, just out of earshot of the men, her professional smile gone, replaced by the deep concern of Diane's oldest friend. "Martin," she whispered, her voice urgent. She gripped my arm tightly. "Are you absolutely 100% sure about this? Look at this place." She pointed toward the garden, toward Diane's roses, which were just starting to bloom. "This is your home, Martin. This is the house you and Diane built together. That rose bush right there, you planted that for her on your 10th anniversary. That oak tree, that's where Ryan had his swing. That porch, you two sat on that porch every single evening for 40 years. 40 years of memories." I looked where she was pointing. I saw the rosebush already getting a little wild without Diane's touch. I saw the swing now rusting. I saw the ghosts of 1,000 happy evenings, Diane's laughter, mixing with the sound of the crickets as the sun went down. A wave of sadness, deep and heavy, washed over me. This was my home. My resolve wavered just for a fraction of a second. This was the house my children took their first steps in. This was the house I brought Diane home to as a bride. Was I really going to let them chase me out? Was I letting them win, letting them drive me from my own sanctuary just out of spite? Then I thought of this morning. I thought of Ryan's flat, dead eyes as he demanded my pension. I thought of Stacy's sneering voice. "You don't need anything anyway." I thought of her complaint about the smell of sickness when my wife was dying in the next room. I thought of my son asking about his mother's jewelry while her heart was still beating. The sadness evaporated. It didn't just fade. It was burned away by that cold, hard clarity. I turned back to Maria. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "Maria," I said, "for the last 6 months, this hasn't been my home. It's been a prison. It's been a waiting room where I was just breathing furniture. Every single memory of Diane in this house has been tainted by them. They've poisoned this well, Maria. Their greed, their disrespect, it's in the walls now. I looked her straight in the eye. Diane wouldn't want me to stay here and become their servant. She wouldn't want me to be their ATM until I died. She told me to be strong. This is me being strong. Diane would want me to be free. She would have told me to burn it to the ground before I let them have it. Maria searched my face, looking for any sign of doubt. She found none. She took a deep breath, and that steel returned to her eyes. She squeezed my arm this time in support. "Okay," she said, her voice firm again. "Okay, Martin. Let's set you free. Let's go sign." We walked back to the porch. The notary had the papers spread out, a thick stack that represented 4 decades of my life. Harrison, the agent, was practically vibrating with impatience. "Mr. Vance," the notary said, his voice formal, "this is the final sales contract between you, Martin Vance, and the Ashford Development Corporation." "I've read the draft, son," I interrupted, my voice calm. "I know exactly what it says. Just tell me where to sign." I picked up the blue ballpoint pen. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name, Martin Vance, on the first line. I signed the title transfer. I signed the disclosures. I signed away 40 years, one page at a time. Each signature felt like a heavy chain link breaking and falling away. This wasn't a loss. This was an extraction. When I finished, I pushed the stack back toward him. "Done." The notary began his work, stamping, embossing seals, making it all legal and final. Harrison, the agent, finally let out the breath he seemed to be holding. He beamed and grabbed my hand, shaking it vigorously. "Congratulations, Mr. Vance. Or my apologies, whichever is more appropriate. It's a fine property. A very fine property." "It was," I said. "Now it's yours." "Indeed." He checked his watch. "As per our agreement for this expedited close, the full $3.2 million will be wired directly to the irrevocable trust account provided by your attorney, Mr. Foster. The wire will be initiated at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The funds will be cleared and available immediately." "Good," I said. Harrison then looked past me, his gaze falling on the 2 moving trucks idling in the driveway. "And as we also discussed, our demolition team will be here at 9 a.m. sharp to begin clearing the lot." He looked at me, a hint of professional concern in his eyes. You're quite sure you'll be cleared out by then?" "That's not a lot of time, Mr. Vance. My team is on a very, very tight schedule." I looked at the house. I looked at the massive U-Haul. I looked at the waiting, moving supervisors. "Don't you worry about your schedule, son," I said, turning to the moving teams and raising my voice so they could hear me. "I'll be out of here in 3 hours. Let's get to work." The moment Harrison and the notary got into their cars and drove away, the ballet began. It was chaotic, but it was my chaos. I was the conductor. The 2 supervisors, one from the white glove team and one from the spring cleaning team, approached me with clipboards. "Mr. Vance, where would you like us to begin?" asked the white glove supervisor, a sharp woman named Sarah. I pointed to her and her 2 careful packers. "Team A, you're with me. You are the preservation team." Then I pointed to the 2 burly men who had arrived with the U-Haul. "Team B, you are the extraction team. You wait here. Do not touch anything until Team A is finished with the valuable items. Your job is speed, not care." They looked confused but nodded. This wasn't a normal move. I led Sarah and her team, Team A, into the house past the living room, cluttered with Ryan and Stacy's junk. I led them to the master bedroom, my bedroom, Diane's and my bedroom. It was the only room in the house that still felt like ours. They hadn't dared to invade this space. Not yet. "This room," I said, my voice quiet. "Everything. The bed, the dressers, the nightstands, the lamps, my clothes in the closet, her clothes in her closet. Everything." Sarah nodded and her team moved with a silent, practiced efficiency. They didn't just throw things in boxes. They laid out thick blankets. They began wrapping Diane's antique vanity table, the one my grandfather had built. I pointed to the wall above our bed. "And that." It was a large oil-painted portrait of Diane painted 20 years ago on our anniversary. She was smiling, her eyes bright, full of life. It was the one thing I looked at every morning and every night. Sarah spoke softly. "We'll need a specialty art crate for this, Mr. Vance. It will be very safe." I just nodded, my throat tight. I watched as they carefully, almost reverently lifted her portrait off the wall, leaving a pale, blank rectangle where it had hung for 2 decades. I felt a sharp, stabbing pain right in my chest. It felt like I was losing her all over again. But then I thought about Stacy's sneering face. I thought about Ryan asking to appraise her jewelry. If I left this here, I knew exactly what would happen to it. They would sell it. They would sell her memory for whatever cash they could get. The pain in my chest solidified back into that cold, hard resolve. This wasn't a loss. This was a rescue. I was saving her from them. I turned and walked to my office. "This room too," I said. "Everything. The desk, the chair, the filing cabinets, and every single book on these shelves. Diane's collection of classic literature. My entire library of engineering texts. 40 years of our lives bound in paper and leather." "Pack every single one," I said, as they worked wrapping my life in bubble wrap and brown paper. I walked back out to the main hall. Team B, the U-Haul crew, was standing there awkwardly waiting for their turn. I walked past them to the main wall in the hallway. The family photo wall. There were pictures of Ryan as a baby. Ryan on his first bicycle. Ryan at his high school graduation, me and Diane on either side beaming with pride. There were photos of his college graduation, his wedding. A whole life documented and framed, a shrine to a son I thought I knew. "Sarah," I called out. She came out of the bedroom. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" I pointed to the wall. "All of them, every frame, carefully." She looked at the photos, then back at me. I could see the question in her eyes. She was a professional. She had seen messy divorces, seen families torn apart. This, she knew, was one of them. "Pack them all," I repeated. "They are being moved to the new address." I wasn't just taking my things. I was taking our history. I was taking his history. They wanted to erase me, to treat me like breathing furniture. Fine. I would take the pictures. I would take the proof that we were ever a family at all. Let them stare at the blank walls and the empty nail holes. I looked at my simple things. The lumpy leather armchair I'd had since my first job. Diane's sewing basket. My old desk. We hadn't lived an extravagant life. We saved. We invested. We bought property. We didn't buy stuff. The house felt lighter as my belongings were carefully carried out the front door and loaded into the clean, professional, prestige mover's truck. It was an amputation just as I'd thought. I was cutting away the infected part of my life. And the infected part was everything that wasn't in these boxes. "Okay, Team A is almost done," I said to Sarah. "Take this address." I handed her a slip of paper with the Elm Street house on it. "Move everything there. Unpack it in the corresponding rooms. The desk in the small office, the bed in the master." "And you, sir?" she asked. "I'll be there later," I said. "I have one last job to supervise here." I watched from the porch as Sarah's white glove team closed the doors on the pristine prestige mover's truck. My 40 years with Diane, the portrait of her smile, my books, my father's desk, our entire shared history was safely packed inside, heading for the little house on Elm Street. I signed the final work order for Sarah, handing her a cash tip that made her eyes widen. She'd earned it. They had handled my memories with respect. They drove away slowly. Now only Team B remained. The 2 large men in simple blue t-shirts were standing by the gaping maw of the 26-foot U-Haul. The truck itself was battered, the orange paint chipped. It looked like a beast of burden, and it was parked right where Diane's roses used to get the most sun. The supervisor, a big man with a thick neck, looked at me, waiting for instructions. "All right, gentlemen," I said, my voice changing. The softness I used with Sarah was gone. Now it's your turn. The extraction team. I led them back into the house. The echoes were already louder. The hallways were bare, the walls covered in pale, blank squares where our family photos had been. We walked past my empty office, past my empty bedroom. I took them to the guest wing, their territory. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of sickness that had lingered when Diane was ill. This was a different kind of rot. It smelled of stale fast food, cheap scented candles trying to cover something, and unwashed laundry. This room, I said. Everything in it. They looked around. The king-sized bed which I had bought but was unmade, the expensive sheets I had paid for tangled on the floor. Clothes were everywhere, piled on the dresser I'd inherited from my mother, draped over the chair in the corner. Stacy's collection of expensive, brightly colored sneakers was in a heap by the door mixed with Ryan's golf shoes. "You mean, packet?" the supervisor asked, looking at the sheer volume of clutter. "No," I said clearly. "I do not mean pack it. I mean move it. From this room into that truck. I do not care how you do it. Just get it out." I turned and led them to the living room, the room where Diane had spent her final days, the room they had turned into their entertainment center. This too. I pointed at the 80-inch television the emergency Ryan had bought with my credit card. That TV, the console underneath it, the video game systems, the speakers, all of it. One of the movers whistled softly. "That's a nice setup, old-timer." "It was," I said. "Take it." I pointed to the corner. There sat the $3,000 Peloton bike I'd bought Stacy for Christmas 2 years ago after she'd sworn it would change her life. It was draped in Ryan's damp bath towels and 3 of her hoodies. There was a thick, fuzzy layer of dust on the digital screen. I don't think it had ever been plugged in. "And that," I said, gesturing to it. "The clothes rack. Take that too." They got to work. Unlike Team A, there was no care. There was no bubble wrap. There was just speed and efficiency. They were exactly what I needed. They hauled the mattress out, sheets and all. They unplugged the giant TV and carried it out sideways, knocking against the doorframe. I didn't care. They started grabbing armfuls of clothes. After a few minutes, the supervisor came back into the room. He looked uncomfortable. He was holding a half-empty, grease-stained pizza box in one hand and a black plastic trash bag that was leaking something sticky onto the floor in the other. Mr. Vance," he said, hesitant. I just looked at him. "This room, well, there's trash. Old pizza boxes under the bed. A bunch of stuff. Old magazines, empty bottles. You want us to just throw this out before we load the heavy furniture?" I looked at the trash in his hands. It was the perfect symbol of their existence in my home. They were just consuming, leaving their garbage behind for someone else to clean up, for me to clean up. I looked him dead in the eye. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the empty house. "Son, did I say throw it out? Did I say clean up?" "No, sir, but I said everything." The man took an involuntary step back. "I want this room empty. If it is in this room, it goes in that truck. The clothes, the furniture, the video games, the half-eaten pizza. I want all of it gone. I want you to scrape their entire life out of my house and put it in that box. Do you understand me?" The man's eyes widened. He'd seen anger before I was sure of it. This was something else. This was finality. He nodded, his face suddenly pale. "Yes, sir. Everything. I got it." He turned to his partner. "You heard him. Everything goes. The trash, too. Load it up." I didn't stay inside. I went back out to the porch and stood in the afternoon sun. I watched the parade of their lives being unceremoniously dumped into the back of that U-Haul. Out came the TV. Out came the mattress. Out came the video games. Out came the Peloton still draped in towels. Out came the overflowing laundry hampers. Out came the designer sneakers, and out came the black plastic bags of their own garbage. It was a cleansing. It was an exorcism. It took them less than 45 minutes. They slammed the heavy metal door of the U-Haul, down the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. I did a final walkthrough. The living room was empty. The guest wing was empty. The kitchen was empty save for the refrigerator, which was mine, and the single-framed wedding photo of Ryan and Stacy, which I had placed face down on the cold tile floor. It was done. My house was finally completely mine again, if only for a few more hours. By 4:45 p.m. it was finished. The last of Team B's men carried out a final leaking trash bag and tossed it into the U-Haul. He slammed the heavy roll door down the sound, booming across the quiet, empty driveway. It felt final. The supervisor from Team B approached me, wiping his brow with a dirty sleeve. He was a big man, but he looked at me with a new kind of wariness. He'd seen messy moves, but this was something else. This was a surgical removal. That's everything, Mr. Vance. Just like you said. Every last bit. Good work, son, I said. I reached into my pocket. My lawyer, Michael, anticipating I would need liquid assets, immediately had arranged a $50,000 cash advance from my new trust. It had been delivered by a courier just before Maria arrived. I pulled out a thick wad of cash I'd set aside and handed the supervisor his payment, plus a tip that made his eyes go wide. This is more than the quote, sir, he stammered. The quote was for a standard job. This was an emergency. You were fast. I appreciate it. He quickly pocketed the money. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. He motioned to his partner, and they climbed into the cab of the U-Haul. They didn't look back. They just started the engine and drove away, the heavy truck groaning as it carried the entire physical weight of Ryan and Stacy's life with it. Now only my own car remained parked quietly by the curb. The sun was getting low, casting long shadows across the lawn. 5 p.m. It was done. I stood there for a moment, in the driveway, just breathing. The air felt cleaner. I turned and walked back into the house I had just sold. I walked through the front door. My footsteps, which had been muffled by carpets and furniture for 40 years, now echoed. Click, clack on the hardwood floors of the foyer. The house was a cavern. I walked into the living room. The indentations in the carpet where their massive sectional sofa used to sit were like fresh scars. The wall where the 80-inch TV had been mounted was a mess of empty brackets and wires a void. I could see the dust bunnies that had collected underneath. I walked down the hall to the guest wing. I stood in the doorway of their room. The smell was gone. The clutter was gone. The only things left were the stains on the carpet that I now knew I would never have to clean. It was just an empty, silent box. I felt peaceful. The word than kept coming to my mind. It was a word Diane used to describe her garden after a storm. It was the feeling of being scoured clean after something violent had passed through. My grief for Diane was still there, a separate clean ache in my chest. But the other feeling, the suffocating, heavy blanket of their presence, their disrespect, their entitlement, that was gone. I could breathe again. This wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for years. It was just a 4,000-square-foot shell that had briefly imprisoned me. I walked back to the kitchen, the echoes of my own steps following me. The kitchen was just as bare. The counters were clear for the first time in years. No fast food wrappers, no stacks of their unopened mail, no dirty dishes in the sink, almost clear. There on the granite island, right in the center, sat one last item. They had forgotten it in their rush to meet me that morning. It was their wedding photograph. A large 8x10 silver frame. I picked it up. I looked at their faces. Ryan in his rented tuxedo beaming with a proud, foolish grin, and Stacy in her white dress clinging to his arm, her eyes shining with a look I now recognized all too well. It wasn't love. It was victory. It was the look of a predator that had secured its prize. She had married the son of a successful engineer, the heir to this big, beautiful house. She thought she had won the lottery. I thought about the vows they must have taken, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer. What a joke. They had fled from sickness, and they were only here for the richer part. I held the heavy frame in my hands. I thought about smashing it. I thought about throwing it in the empty trash can. I thought about taking it with me. No. Instead, I calmly turned the photograph over. I laid it face down on the cold kitchen tile floor right in the center of the room. I left it there. A quiet final statement. That was the only thing I was leaving behind for them. The image of their union turned away from the light. Let the demolition crew find it tomorrow. Or let Ryan and Stacy find it tonight if they dared to come back. It didn't matter. I walked out the front door and for the last time pulled it shut behind me. I didn't lock it. It wasn't my door anymore. The supervisor for Team B handed me the rental agreement and the keys. The truck was mine for 24 hours. They climbed into their own pickup and drove off, leaving me alone in the driveway with my car and this 26-foot orange beast. The sun was touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was getting dark. I climbed up into the cab of the U-Haul. The seat was cracked vinyl, and the cab smelled like stale cigarettes and sweat. I put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over with a deep diesel roar. I put the massive truck in gear and pulled out of the driveway I had known for 40 years. I felt a strange sense of power. It was a clumsy, heavy, awful vehicle to drive, but I was in control. In the giant side mirror, I could see my own house, the house that was no longer mine, shrinking in the twilight. And I knew that in the back of this truck, rattling around with every bump, was the entire parasitic life Ryan and Stacy had built on my back. All their junk, all their overpriced, useless possessions. Now where to leave it, my first thought was the airport. Long-term parking. Let them pay a fortune to get it out. But no, that was too far, too complicated. What about under a bridge down by the river? No, that was too dramatic, too cinematic. This wasn't a movie. This was my life. I needed something simple, anonymous, something that fit the narrative of a confused old man. Then it hit me. Walmart. Of course. The great American crossroads. A parking lot so vast, so chaotic, so filled with people coming and going at all hours that no one would notice one more battered U-Haul truck. I drove the 5 miles to the supercenter on the edge of town. I didn't go to the front where the lights were bright and the security cameras were pointed. I drove the truck around to the far back side past the garden center to the edge of the lot that bordered an empty field. It was the land of abandoned shopping carts and lost hubcaps. I found the perfect spot, a dark corner between a tractor trailer that had clearly been unhitched for days and a row of rusted shipping containers. No cameras, no lights. I maneuvered the truck in my 40 years of engineering, making me precise even with a beast like this. I backed it perfectly against the containers, making it just a little harder to access. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. I got out and walked to the back. I double-checked the heavy roll door. It was locked secure. I walked to the cab and locked that too. I stood there for a moment just looking at it. A 26-foot monument to their greed. I held the simple U-Haul key in my palm. I could toss it under the truck. I could leave it on the tire. That would be the easiest thing. No, I said out loud to the empty parking lot. That's too easy. That's not what a forgetful old man would do. They wanted me to be confused. They wanted me to be senile. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would be so forgetful, so out of it that this key would simply disappear. I walked away from the truck, out from the shadows and toward the front of the store. I pulled out my smartphone. the one Ryan had once called a brick for old people. I opened the Uber app, an app I knew painfully well, but only from the driver's side. It felt strange to be a passenger. I requested a ride. A little blue Prius pulled up 3 minutes later. "Martin?" the young driver asked. "That's me," I said, getting in the back. "Where to, Martin?" I gave him the address. "The main post office, in Oakdale." The driver nodded. Oakdale was the next town over, a good 20-minute drive. He didn't ask why an old man at a Walmart needed to go to a post office in another town at this hour. He just drove. I sat in the back, the U-Haul key heavy in my pocket. I watched the lights of Charlotte go by. He dropped me off in front of the post office. The lobby was closed, but the drive-through drop boxes were open. I walked up to the big blue steel mailbox, the kind the Postmaster General himself couldn't break into. I took the U-Haul key out of my pocket. It was attached to a simple plastic tag with the truck number on it. I held it over the dark, narrow slot. "Good luck, Ryan," I whispered. "I hope you find your 80-inch TV before the U-Haul company reports it stolen. I hope you find it before it ends up at a police auction." I let it go. The clink, clank, clunk as the key hit the bottom of the metal box was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock turning, the sound of a door closing, the sound of me finally being done. I turned around, pulled my phone out one more time, and opened the app. I typed in a new address, the little bungalow on Elm Street, my new home. I retrieved my own car from the garage of the big house, my old reliable sedan. I had parked it there this morning, hidden behind a stack of gardening supplies, knowing I wouldn't be leaving in the U-Haul. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway for the absolute last time. I didn't look back. The drive to Elm Street was short. 2 blocks. That's all. 2 blocks away, I had a sanctuary waiting for me all this time. I pulled into the small driveway of the bungalow. It was modest, a 1950s brick house, but the yard was neat. The Prestige Movers truck was gone. I used my key and opened the front door. The house was silent. But it was a different silence. Not the heavy, oppressive quiet of the big house, but a peaceful, welcoming quiet. It was small, maybe 1,500 square feet. Just 2 bedrooms. But it was clean. And it was mine. The moving team had done exactly what I asked. They were truly professionals. My old lumpy leather armchair, the one Stacy always said was disgusting and needed to be burned, was sitting right by the front window overlooking a small, tidy yard. I walked into the living room. There, on the mantel of the small brick fireplace, they had placed the large oil-painted portrait of Diane. Her smile lit up the entire room. I stood there just looking at her. "We're home, Di," I whispered. My throat felt thick. This little house in just a few hours felt more like a home than that 4,000 square foot monstrosity had in the last 3 years. In the big house, they had relegated her photos to the hallway as if she were a distant relative. Here she was, the center of the room, as she should be. My study was already set up in the second bedroom. My books were on the shelves, my desk was in place. My clothes were hung in the closet of the master bedroom. It was simple. It was all I ever needed. I went into the bathroom. I turned on the shower. The water pressure was excellent. I took a long, hot shower, washing off the grime of the day. The literal grime from the U-Haul and the figurative grime of Ryan and Stacy. I felt like I was shedding a skin. I got out, dried off, and put on a clean pair of slacks and a crisp blue shirt. I combed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like a 70-year-old victim. I didn't look forgetful. I looked like Martin Vance, engineer, widower, and a man who was finally completely in charge. I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. "Almost dinner time," I said to my reflection. A cold smile touched my lips. Ryan and Stacy had said they'd be over around 7. They were expecting their forgetful old dad to have a meal waiting. They were expecting to walk in, eat my food, and finalize the theft of my pension. I walked to the new kitchen. My boxes were neatly stacked. I opened one labeled Bar. I pulled out a bottle of good single malt whiskey. The bottle Diane and I only opened on special occasions. I considered this a special occasion. I poured 2 fingers into a heavy glass. No ice. I took a slow sip. The whiskey burned a clean, sharp fire. It anchored me. I could stay here. I could lock the door, turn on my reading lamp, and let them discover the empty house on their own. I could let them call the police screaming about a robbery. No, that wasn't good enough. They had looked me in the eye and called me a liar about the electric bill. They had looked me in the eye and demanded my income. This wasn't something to be discovered. This was a judgment. And a judgment needs a judge. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to be the one to tell them. I wanted to watch the arrogance and entitlement drain away to be replaced by the cold, hard panic of reality. I wanted them to know this wasn't an accident. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a choice. My choice. I grabbed my car keys. I took my glass of whiskey. I wasn't going to hide in my new house. I had one last thing to do, one last visit to pay. I was going to go back to the old house, the empty-souled, hollowed-out house, and I was going to wait for them. I was going to wait for dinner. I drove my sedan back from Elm Street. The 2 blocks felt like crossing a border into a foreign country. The car, my old familiar car, felt strange. I was returning to a place that looked like my home but was no longer mine. It was a shell. I had sold it. The demolition crew would be here in the morning. I didn't pull into the driveway. I parked across the street just past my neighbor's house under the deep shadow of a large, mature oak tree. I turned off the engine and the lights. The car went dark. I sat there invisible, just watching. My house, there it sat. Dark, empty, silent. The windows were blank like the eyes of a skull. It looked wrong. For 40 years, that house had been full of light, of life. The smell of Diane's cooking. The sound of Ryan's basketball pounding on the driveway. The murmur of the television. Now it was just a box. A 4,000-square-foot tomb of memories I had just signed over. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I felt a strange, cold, surgical calm. The kind of focus I used to get right before a major structural presentation. This was just the last part of the plan. The final calculation. I had engineered my escape. Now I was just here to watch the controlled demolition of their expectations. I looked at the front porch. The swing where Diane and I had sat on so many evenings was gone safe at Elm Street. But the steps were still there. Cold, hard concrete. I thought about hiding. I could just sit here in the dark, wait for them to arrive, and watch the show from a safe distance. I could let them run around, panic, call the police. I could let them discover the truth from a formal letter from my lawyer tomorrow. That would be the easy way. Then I remembered Diane's voice. In those last few weeks when the pain was bad, but her mind was still sharp, she had grabbed my hand. She saw how Ryan and Stacy were hovering, how they barely spoke to me, how they were already treating me like an inconvenient piece of furniture. "Don't let them bully you, Martin," she had whispered, her voice a papery rasp. "Don't let them. You're stronger than you think. You always were." I had spent 6 months being bullied. I had spent 6 months letting my grief be their shield, their excuse. I had let them treat me like a forgetful, useless old man. Hiding in the car. That's what a bullied man would do. That's what a victim would do, and I was done being the victim. Diane was right. I was stronger than this. My strength wasn't just in my mind, in my calculations. It was in my spine. It was time to show them. I picked up the heavy glass from the cup holder. The whiskey I had poured at Elm Street was still nearly full. I opened the car door. The interior light flashed on for a second. then went dark as I closed it with a quiet, solid thunk. I stood on the sidewalk across the street. I could smell my neighbor's barbecue. Life was going on normal. I crossed the street. My footsteps were the only sound. I walked right up the pathway I had built with my own hands, stone by stone, in 1985. I walked up the 3 steps to the porch. My porch. I sat down on the top step, right in the center. I leaned my back against the pillar. The concrete was cold, and the chill went right through my slacks, but it felt good. It felt real. The sun was a fiery red slit on the horizon. The sky was a deep, bruised purple. It was beautiful. I was a stranger sitting on the porch of a house I no longer owned, waiting to confront the son who thought he had stolen my future. I was the executioner sitting down to our meal with the condemned. I raised the glass of whiskey to the empty house, to the memory of Diane, to the end of an era. "This is for you, Di," I whispered. I took a slow, burning sip. The whiskey warmed my chest, settling that cold, hard resolve right into my bones. I checked my watch. 6:50 p.m. They would be here soon. They were always punctual when a free meal was involved. I sat there. I listened to the crickets start their evening song. I watched the first lightning bugs of the night begin to dance over the lawn. I was not afraid. I was not sad. I was just, ready. I was Martin Vance. I was 70 years old, and I was waiting. I sat there on the top step, the cold of the concrete seeping through my slacks. It was 7:05 p.m. The streetlights had just flickered on, painting the neat suburban lawns in a pale, sickly yellow. My lawn. For now. I swirled the last of the whiskey in my heavy glass. The air was still. I was waiting. I was perfectly calm. Headlights cut the dusk. Ryan's black BMW, the one I was still paying the insurance on, turned into the driveway. He always took the corner too fast, spitting gravel onto the grass Diane had worked so hard to maintain. The doors slammed loud and jarring in the quiet evening. I didn't move. I was just a shadow on a dark porch. They didn't even glance my way. They were laughing. Stacy's voice, sharp and high, carried clearly. "I swear, Ryan, if that old man just heated up a frozen pizza again, I'm going to lose it. I'm not eating that trash." Ryan chuckled. That short, barking laugh he has. "Relax, honey. It's the last time. After he signs over that pension, we can celebrate. We'll order steak. He can have the pizza." They walked right up the path, Stacy in the lead, her face illuminated by the bright screen of her phone. They were too absorbed in their own world, too focused on the free meal they were about to demand, too certain of the night ahead. They didn't notice the U-Haul was gone. They didn't notice the house was dark. They didn't notice me sitting 10 feet away watching them. Stacy pushed the front door open. I'd left it unlocked. It swung inward on silent hinges, opening into a dark, gaping hole. She stepped inside. Ryan followed, still talking about some sports game. And then the guy just... He stopped. His voice just... stopped. The door didn't close. It stayed wide open, spilling the pale yellow light from the foyer onto the porch. And then came the silence. A deep, heavy, absolute silence. The kind of silence that only exists in a 4,000-square-foot vacuum. The kind of silence that swallows sound. I heard Stacy take a sharp, confused breath. "Ryan." Her voice was small, uncertain. "What? Why is the..." And then the silence broke. It was shattered by a sound I had never heard before, not even when Diane was at her sickest. A high-pitched animal scream of pure, undiluted panic. "Ah, Ryan, we've been robbed. We've been robbed. Everything is gone." I heard them. The sound I had been waiting for. The sound of their footsteps on the bare hardwood floors. Thump, 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 it echoed. The house was a drum, and they were beating on it in their terror. They were running from room to room. I heard Stacy scream again, a different sound this time, a wail of personal loss as she ran into the living room. "The TV! Ryan, they took the TV! They took my Peloton! Oh my God, Ryan, they took everything!" Then came Ryan's voice, louder, higher, laced with a different kind of terror. He wasn't screaming about the TV. He had realized something else. "What the hell, Dad, Dad!" I heard him run back to the foyer, his heavy feet pounding. He ran toward the kitchen. "They took Dad. Dad's gone, Stacy. Oh my God, they kidnapped him. Dad, where's the old man?" I sat there on the step. I took a slow, final sip of my whiskey. Kidnapped. It hadn't even occurred to me they'd think that. They didn't just think I was forgetful. They thought I was helpless, so weak, so pathetic, that a team of burglars had decided to steal the breathing furniture right along with the sofa. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their asset. The golden goose that laid the pension eggs was gone. They both came barreling back toward the front door, their faces pale in the dim light. They were ready to run out onto the lawn to call 911 to report the theft of their father. "We have to call the police," Stacy was yelling, her hands flapping at her sides. "His car is gone. They took him. They took the old man." They burst out onto the porch, almost tripping over each other. They stopped dead at the top of the steps. They had finally seen me. Just a 70-year-old man sitting in the dark, holding an empty glass. They both froze on the top step. Their mouths were open. Stacy was the one who was still pointing, her hand trembling, but now it was pointing at me. Ryan just stared, his chest heaving, his face a mask of total blank confusion. He looked from me, sitting calmly, to the dark, empty void of the house behind him, and back to me. The wheels were turning, but they were grinding. "Dad?" Ryan's voice was a shaky whisper. He took a step toward me. "Dad. Oh my God. You're okay. You're okay. What happened? Where were you?" He rushed forward and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me as if checking for bullet holes. "The thieves. Did they hurt you? Did they lock you out here? What happened to your car?" "We have to call 911. Stacy, call 911. Stacy, however, was not moving. Her panic wasn't for me. Her panic was for her stuff. "Martin," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What are you doing just sitting here? Get up. Call the police. They took everything. My clothes, my shoes, my Peloton. Ryan, they took the 80-inch TV." Ryan let go of me and spun around, his frustration boiling over. "Who cares about the TV? Stacy, Dad was... Dad, what happened?" I let them spin in their own panic for a moment more. I let the silence stretch out. I looked at my son, his face desperate. I looked at my daughter-in-law, her face ugly with materialistic rage. "Nothing happened," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the night air like a razor. Ryan shook his head, not understanding. "What, Dad? What are you talking about? The house is empty. Look." He gestured wildly at the dark doorway. "We've been robbed. We have to call the police now." "No, Ryan," I said. My voice still perfectly level, perfectly calm. "We don't. There was no robbery." Stacy took a step toward me, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. The panic was fading, being replaced by a confusion that was even more profound. What do you mean there was no robbery?" "Then where is all our stuff? Where is the TV?" She still couldn't get past the television. I turned my head and looked at her. I looked her directly in the eyes for the first time in months. I didn't see a daughter-in-law. I saw a stranger. "I don't know where your television is, Stacy," I said. "What about our clothes, my shoes?" she demanded. "Don't know about that either," I said. "Well, where is your stuff?" Ryan asked, his mind finally catching up, realizing the flaw in his kidnapping theory. "Your chair, Mom's picture, my things," I said, "are safe." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for them, but it was a piece from a box they didn't even know existed. They couldn't make it fit. Ryan looked helpless. Dad, I don't understand. If there was no robbery, then what happened? I finished the last drop of my whiskey. The glass was empty. I set it down gently on the concrete step beside me. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked out at the quiet street at the neighbor's house with its lights on, a picture of normal life. Then I looked back at the two of them, poised on the edge of the abyss they had dug for themselves. I sold the house, I said. I savored the silence that followed. It was absolute. The crickets stopped chirping. The distant traffic seemed to fade. It was just the three of us frozen in that moment. Their faces. Oh, their faces. It was worth everything. It wasn't the panic of a robbery. It wasn't the fear of a kidnapping. It was a deeper, more profound shock. It was the shock of a reality that simply did not compute. It was the sound of their entire parasitic, entitled world shattering into a million pieces at their feet. Stacy's mouth opened. A little "oh" came out, but no sound followed. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Ryan. Ryan just stared. His brain had simply shut down. He shook his head, a tiny involuntary movement, as if trying to dislodge a word that didn't make sense. What? He finally whispered. His voice was hoarse. I repeated, enunciating every single syllable. I sold the house. Stacy finally found her voice. It wasn't a scream. It was a baffled, furious squeak. You can't just sell the house. This is our house. No, Stacy, I said, standing up for the first time. I felt all of my 70 years, but I also felt 10 feet tall. It was my house, and I did. What? What kind of joke is this, Dad? Ryan stammered. He was trying to laugh, but it came out as a strangled bark. Okay, very funny. You got us. Where's all our stuff? In the garage. Did you rent a storage unit? You can't sell the house. He ran his hands through his hair, his voice rising with every word. This is our house, Dad. This is the family home. No, Ryan, I said. I was so calm. My voice was like ice. It was my house. I built it. I paid for it. And today at 3 p.m. I sold it. I paused, letting the words sink in. $3.2 million. Cash. Stacy, who had been frozen in horror, suddenly snapped to attention. Her eyes, which had been darting around looking for her Peloton, became laser-focused on me. Her entire demeanor changed. The panic over her possessions was instantly vaporized by a much stronger emotion. Greed. 3.2 million, she whispered. She repeated the number as if it were a prayer. $3.2 million. Ryan hadn't even processed the number. He was still stuck on the first part. But where will we live, Dad? You can't do this to us. You can't just sell our home out from under us. It's illegal. Is it? I asked. Is it illegal for a man to sell his own property? The property that is solely in his name and the name of his deceased wife, Michael Foster. My lawyer seemed to think it was perfectly legal when he filed the paperwork. Stacy put her hand on Ryan's arm. She was the smart one. She had already moved on to the next phase of the calculation. The house was gone, but the money was here. Ryan, calm down, she said, her voice suddenly sweet, oily. He's upset. He's grieving. He's not thinking clearly. She turned that new, sickly sweet smile on me. Dad, Martin, you're not well. You can't just make a decision like that. $3.2 million. That's a lot of money for one person to manage. You need help. I knew exactly what she was doing. The confused old man narrative. They were trying to pivot. If I was too senile to pay an electric bill, I was definitely too senile to handle $3 million. Oh, I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Stacy, I said. For the first time in a long time, And I have all the help I need. I have Maria, I have Michael. They've been very efficient. Ryan finally latched on to the new reality. But, okay. You sold it. Fine. $3 million. That's great for the family. So, where do we go? Did you buy a new house, a condo? Where are we moving? That's the part you're not understanding, son, I said. You are not moving anywhere. I am. I've already moved. But what about us? He asked. His voice was small. He sounded for the first time like a lost child. I looked at the empty house, the dark windows. I let the silence hang for another long second. That's the part you really need to listen to, I said. The new owner's Ashford development. They aren't interested in the house, Ryan. They're interested in the land. They're not moving in. What does that mean? Stacy asked, her voice sharp. It means, I said, looking right at her, that the demolition crew will be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow, with bulldozers. By this time tomorrow, this house will be a pile of rubble. That was the final blow. This wasn't something they could negotiate. This wasn't a problem they could manage. It was over. The house, their free ride, their entire life plan was going to be pushed into a dumpster in less than 15 hours. Stacy's knees literally buckled. She stumbled back and sat down hard on the top step, the one I had just stood up from. Her face was the color of chalk. No, she whispered. No. Ryan just looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, animalistic terror. The house was gone. The money was untouchable. All that was left was their stuff. My things, Stacy suddenly wailed, her voice rising again, this time in real profound despair. My clothes, my designer bags, Ryan, my mother's jewelry, Martin, you monster, what did you do with our things? Her voice was a desperate shriek. My things, Martin, my designer bags, my shoes, all our stuff. What did you do with our stuff? I looked at her. Her face was contorted, the fake sympathy from that morning replaced by a raw, ugly panic. It was never about me. It was never about Diane. It was always just about the stuff. That, I said, as if it were a minor detail I'd almost forgotten. Your things. Yes, well, I couldn't just leave them here for the bulldozers, could I? That would be wasteful. I put my hands in my pockets and tried to look thoughtful. So I was very kind, actually. I rented a U-Haul, a big one, 26 feet. I had a team load everything into it for you. The TV, what did you call it? The Peloton, all those shoes. Even the pizza boxes from under Ryan's bed. Every last bit of it. A brief flicker of relief crossed Ryan's face. A U-Haul? Okay. So where is it? Is it at your new place, the place on Elm Street? Elm Street, I said, feigning confusion. Oh, goodness, no. That's just a little two-bedroom. There's no room for all that. Then where is it, Martin? Stacy shouted, stepping toward me. Tell us where our things are. Well, that's the funny part, I said, looking from her to Ryan. I parked it somewhere safe. Somewhere public. I parked it at the Walmart. The Walmart, Ryan repeated, dumbfounded. You left all our possessions in a Walmart parking lot. It seemed like a good idea at the time, I said with a shrug. Plenty of lights, lots of people. But the key, Stacy said, her voice trembling. Martin, where's the key to the truck? I reached into my pocket, the one I had put the crumpled bank account paper in earlier. I patted it. Then I patted my other pocket. I frowned, trying to look puzzled. The key. Oh dear. The key. You know, I had it right here. I think. Or maybe I left it. On the tire, or... Was it the post office? I looked up at Stacy, my eyes wide with the most perfect imitation of senile confusion I could muster. I just can't seem to remember. I'm so forgetful these days. You know that, Stacy. You were just telling me this morning how forgetful I am. You were right all along. I looked her dead in the eye as I said it, and in that instant she knew. The blood drained from her face. She understood. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a sentence. This was a calculated, precise, and devastating act of revenge. You did this on purpose, she whispered. Her voice was flat, dead. The fight had gone out of her. Ryan, however, was still catching up. He was still in problem-solving mode. "Which Walmart, Dad?" he demanded, grabbing my arm. "There are 3 Walmarts in a 10-mile radius. Which one, and what do you mean, the post office?" I gently removed his hand from my arm. "I'm not sure, son. The one on the highway, or maybe the one by the airport. It's all a bit of a fog. You know how it is. You'll just have to start looking, I suppose." I let them picture it. Driving from one massive sprawling parking lot to another in the dark, searching for a single orange truck among hundreds of other cars. And even if they found it. "What then, the key, Dad?" Ryan yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "What about the key?" "Oh, I'm pretty sure I dropped it in one of those blue mailboxes," I said as if the memory were a faint echo. "The ones for the post office. It seemed like a safe place for it at the time. You know, federal property." Stacy let out a sound, a half laugh, half sob. She knew. She knew you can't just ask for a key back from a USPS drop box. She knew that key was gone. It was in a steel vault buried under thousands of letters not to be seen again until a postal worker opened it in the morning, looked at it in confusion, and probably threw it in the trash. You, Stacy stammered, pointing at me. You stole our things, our possessions. We'll call the police. We'll have you arrested for theft." "Theft?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Stacy, I didn't steal anything. I paid with my own money to have your belongings moved from my property, which I was in the process of selling. I rented a truck for you. I paid for the movers. I have the receipts. I was just helping. Just like you wanted to help me with my pension. I was being a good, dutiful father. I just forgot where I put the key." Ryan was doing the math. His face was pale. "The truck, the rental. How long is it rented for?" "Oh, just 24 hours, I said breezily. "I paid in cash. It's due back, let's see, by about 3 p.m. tomorrow. If it's not back by then, I suppose the U-Haul company will, well, I imagine they'll report it stolen, along with everything inside it." That was the final turn of the screw. They had until 3 p.m. tomorrow to search every Walmart in Charlotte, find the truck, and then find a way to break into it, which would be a crime all before it was officially listed as a stolen vehicle. Their 80-inch TV, her designer bags, their entire life, ticking away. "You're a monster," Stacy whispered, her voice full of venom. "A cruel, evil old man." "No, Stacy," I said, turning to leave them there on the porch of the empty, condemned house. "I'm just forgetful. Remember." Stacy's face was a terrible thing to see. It was twisted with a rage that went beyond the loss of her stuff. It was the rage of a cornered animal, the fury of someone who had been outsmarted. You monster!" she shrieked, her voice breaking. "You planned this. You planned all of it. We'll sue you. We'll sue you for everything. We'll tell the court you're insane, you're senile. We'll have you declared incompetent." "Will you?" I asked. I stood up from the step. My knees ached a little, but as I rose to my full height, I felt taller than I had in years. I looked down on both of them. My son and his wife still standing on my old porch, a porch that would be rubble in a few hours. "Sue me," I repeated, my voice still quiet. What exactly will you sue me for, Stacy? For selling my own house, the house that was 100% in my name, and the name of my deceased wife? Or will you sue me for paying with my own money to have your belongings moved for free? I shook my head. That's a weak case, even for a lawyer as desperate as the one you'd have to hire. Ryan finally spoke. His voice was low, trembling with a fury that was different from Stacy's. It was the fury of a spoiled child who just had his favorite toy taken away. You tricked us, Dad, he hissed. You played us. You let us think. You lied to us. Lied, I said. Did I lie? No. You lied, Ryan. You lied about the electric bill. You lied about the emergency car repair. You lied about caring for me. I just stopped participating in your lies. I took a step closer to him, right up to the bottom step. We were almost eye to eye. And Ryan, I said, my voice dropping even lower, about that paycheck. His eyes flickered. He had almost forgotten about it in the chaos of the house and the U-Haul. My paycheck, I continued. The one you were so worried about. The one you and Stacy decided this morning I didn't need. The one you wanted me to sign over to your new secret bank account. It's for the family, Dad, he stammered, falling back on his old weak excuses. To protect you. Stop, I said. The word was sharp and he flinched. Just stop talking. You don't need to worry about my pension anymore, Ryan. You don't need to worry about my little consulting paycheck either. What do you mean? I said that you were thinking too small. You were worried about my monthly income. You were so focused on the pennies that you didn't even see the fortune. You were trying to steal my Social Security check while you were sitting on a $3 million gold mine. Stacy's head snapped up. The money, she whispered. The 3.2 million. Yes, Stacy, I said. The money. The money from the sale of my house. I know you're worried about where it's going. You're probably thinking that if I'm this forgetful, you can still get your hands on it. You're thinking you can still set me declared incompetent. You think you can still win. I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. That was exactly what she was thinking. So let me make this perfectly clear for both of you, I said. Don't bother. Don't waste your time or what little money you have left on a lawyer, because you're too late. What did you do? Ryan asked, his voice filled with dread. This morning when you were congratulating yourselves on tricking me, I was on the phone with my attorney, my real attorney, Michael Foster. The $3.2 million from this sale is not going into my checking account. It's not going anywhere you can find it. As of 9 a.m. tomorrow, it will be wired directly into a newly created bulletproof, irrevocable trust. I let the legal terms hang in the air. Stacy. I was sure knew exactly what irrevocable meant. A trust, I said, savoring the word, that Michael Foster drafted himself. A trust that I am the sole beneficiary of. A trust that I am the sole trustee of. A trust that is legally shielded from all outside claims, shielded from creditors, shielded from lawsuits, and shielded from greedy, ungrateful children. The color drained from Ryan's face. Stacy just stared, her mouth opening and closing silently. So you see, I said, you don't have to worry about my paycheck anymore. You don't have to worry about my forgetfulness. You don't have to worry about protecting me, because I'm perfectly protected. My money is protected. The only thing you need to worry about is yourselves. Ryan's voice cracked. The desperation was real now. The realization that the money was gone, truly gone, hit him. Dad, you can't, he yelled, his voice echoing in the empty street. You can't just do this. We're your family. We're all you have left. Stacy, seeing her $3.2 million future evaporating, chimed in her voice, a desperate pleading whine. He's right. Martin, family doesn't do this to family. What about Diane? What would she think? You owe her. You owe us. You owe us for staying here, for helping you, helping me. The absurdity of that claim after everything was the final straw. You owe Mom, Ryan shouted again, spitting the words. That was it. That was the line. I took a step forward. I walked right up the steps until I was standing on the porch, towering over them. I looked at Ryan, my son, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard finality. Don't, I said. My voice was low, and the single word stopped his tirade. He looked at me confused. I said. I repeated my voice hard and slow, letting each word land like a hammer blow. Don't ever mention your mother's name. He flinched. He had never heard this tone from me. This wasn't the forgetful old man. This wasn't Dad. This was Martin Vance, the man who had built bridges, and the man who was now burning this one to the ground. You owe her. I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't allowed myself to feel for 6 months. You, Stacy, who complained about the smell of sickness in her dying days. You who fanned the air because the scent of your mother-in-law's final breaths offended you. Stacy recoiled, her face pale. You, Ryan. I turned to my son. You who asked me to appraise her jewelry while she was still breathing in that hospice bed in the living room. You who couldn't wait to cash in on her corpse. You think I owe her memory. To you. They had no answer. They just stared, their hypocrisy exposed. I took care of your mother, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I held her hand when she was scared. I cleaned her when she was sick. I sat by her bed for 6 months and listened to her breathe, praying for just one more day, while you two were in the next room watching your 80-inch television and using my credit card to buy video games. I gestured to the empty house behind them. I worked for 40 years. I continued to build this, to build everything, every floorboard you're standing on, every dollar you've spent. I paid for it with my hands, my mind, and my time. Time I could have spent traveling with Diane, but I stayed. I worked. I saved. I built a company. I gave you everything. A college education you wasted. A car you don't pay for. A roof over your head rent-free for 3 years. You took it all, I said, my voice thick with contempt. You took it like you were entitled to it. You took it and you didn't even say thank you. You just demanded more. This morning you stood right there in my kitchen and demanded my pension. I owe you. I almost laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. I owe you nothing. You owe me. You owe me for the food you ate. You owe me for the electricity you used. You owe me for the 3 years of your lives you wasted sitting in my house like breathing furniture. Stacy flinched. She knew I had heard her. I turned to her. She was pale as a ghost, trembling. And you, Stacy, I said, you were right about one thing this morning. Absolutely right. She just stared at me, her eyes wide, confused. You told me I don't need anything, that I just sit around. You were right. I don't need this giant empty house. I don't need an 80-inch TV or a closet full of shoes I never wear. I don't need a BMW or a Peloton that doubles as a coat rack. I took a step down from the porch onto the walkway. I was leaving. I was finally leaving. And I certainly do not need you. I turned my back on them and started to walk away. Dad. Ryan's voice was different now. It wasn't angry. It wasn't entitled. It was terrified. It was the voice of a 9-year-old who had just realized he was lost in the mall. Dad, wait. Where are you going? You can't just leave us here. The house is, we have nowhere to go. What are we supposed to do? I stopped under the streetlight at the end of my old walkway. I didn't turn around. I just stood there for a moment, looking at the free, open, dark road ahead. I don't know, Ryan, I said to the empty street. I suppose you'll have to get a job. But the U-Haul. Our stuff, Dad, please, you can't do this. I can, I said. I thought about the key sitting at the bottom of that dark metal USPS box 2 towns over. And I already have. You wanted me to be forgetful. Consider it my gift to you. I kept walking. I heard Stacy start to sob, not the fake manipulative sobs I'd heard before, but the ugly, gulping, hopeless sobs of total defeat. I heard Ryan yell my name one more time, a desperate, hollow sound that the night swallowed up. I didn't look back. I just kept walking down the sidewalk past the neighbor's house toward the corner, toward my car, toward the little bungalow on Elm Street, toward the portrait of Diane waiting for me by the fireplace. For the first time in 6 long, agonizing months, I felt free. I felt light. I felt like Martin Vance again. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back to see their faces one last time. I just kept walking. I stepped off the walkway I had built and onto the public sidewalk. I heard Stacy let out another wail, this one of pure animal despair. I heard Ryan shout my name again. Dad, Dad, wait. His voice was thin, pathetic. It had no power over me anymore. I just kept walking. I walked past my neighbor's house, past the next one. I turned the corner and their voices faded, swallowed by the sound of the evening crickets. I was just a 70-year-old man out for a quiet evening stroll. The 2 blocks to Elm Street felt like the longest and shortest walk of my life. I wasn't a prisoner escaping. I was a homeowner walking to my new home. I walked up the small path to the brick bungalow. It was dark, but I had left the porch light on. It was a small, warm, yellow light. It looked like, welcome. I pulled the new key from my pocket. It slid into the lock smoothly. I opened the door. I stepped inside. The silence that greeted me here was not the hollow, echoing void of the house I just left. It was a warm, gentle quiet. It was peace. The white glove team had left one lamp on in the living room, casting a soft glow. My lumpy leather armchair was waiting for me by the window, and there on the mantel over the small fireplace was Diane's portrait. Her smile seemed to warm the entire room. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just breathing in the air. It smelled like old books and the faint, clean scent of lemon oil from the polished wood. It smelled like home. The weight of the last 3 years, the constant tension, the swallowed insults, the feeling of being an inconvenient guest in my own house, it just evaporated. The crushing weight of their entitlement lifted from my shoulders. I felt light. I felt like I could finally stand up straight. My grief for Diane was still there. It was a clean, sharp ache right in the center of my chest. It would always be there. But it wasn't the suffocating, muddy, complicated grief it had been. It wasn't tangled up anymore with the anger and resentment I felt for Ryan and Stacy. It was just grief. My grief. My love for my wife. I could finally mourn her properly, without their noise, without their greed, without their constant taking. I walked to the kitchen. It was small, but my things were there. I opened a box labeled Kitchen, Diane's favorites. Inside was her old kettle and a tin of the Earl Grey tea she loved. I filled the kettle with water and put it on the stove. While it heated, I sat down in my armchair. It fit me perfectly. It was lumpy in all the right places. The kettle whistled. I went and made a cup of tea. I held the warm mug in my hands, walked back to my chair, and sat down. I looked at Diane's portrait. "Well, Di," I whispered. "It's just you and me again. I finally did it. I'm sorry it took me so long." I sipped the tea. It was hot, aromatic. I felt the tension of the day, the sale, the movers, the confrontation finally drain out of me, leaving me exhausted, but deeply, profoundly, peacefully done. I thought about Ryan and Stacy. They were out there in the dark, frantic. They were probably at the first Walmart running through the parking lot, frantically clicking the BMW's alarm button, hoping to hear the distant chirp of a U-Haul. Or maybe they were at a police station trying to convince a skeptical officer that their senile father had made their 80-inch TV disappear. It didn't matter. It was their problem now, not mine. I picked up my phone. I had one more call to make. She answered immediately. "Martin, are you okay? I've been staring at my phone for 2 hours." "I'm more than okay, Maria," I said. And my voice wasn't the thin, frail voice of the victim. It was just my voice. "I'm home." "Oh, Martin," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Thank God. Did they show up?" "They did. And they were very, very surprised." Maria let out a short, sharp laugh. "I bet they were. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall." "It was quite the performance," I said. "But Maria, I wanted to say thank you. For today. For moving so fast. For everything." "You don't ever have to thank me, Martin," she said softly. "Diane was my best friend. I'm just glad you're finally safe from them." "I am," I said. I looked around the small, peaceful room. "I really am." I took another sip of tea. "Hey, Maria, are you busy for breakfast tomorrow? My treat. There's a diner down the street. I'm told they make a decent omelet." "I'd love to, Martin," she said, her voice smiling. "I'd love to. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is perfect," I said. "I'll see you then." I hung up the phone and settled back into my chair. I looked at Diane's smile. The bulldozers would be arriving at the old house in about 13 hours. Ryan and Stacy had a long night ahead of them. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt at peace. I was home. 1 week. That's how long it took to feel human again. 7 days. I woke up in the little house on Elm Street to the sound of birds, not to the sound of Stacy's blender or Ryan's loud video games. I made my own coffee. I read the entire newspaper front to back without interruption. I had breakfast with Maria at the diner just as I'd planned. We talked for 2 hours. We talked about Diane. We laughed. It was the first time I had laughed. Really laughed in 6 months. Today I was sitting in Michael Foster's office. His office was on the 20th floor overlooking the entire Charlotte skyline. It was quiet, smelled of leather and wood polish, and the coffee his assistant brought me was in a real ceramic mug, not a paper cup. Michael leaned back in his large, comfortable chair. He looked at me over the top of his glasses, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "Well, Martin," he said, "it's been an eventful week for you." "You could say that, Michael," I said, sipping my coffee. "How are the funds? Is everything settled?" "The trust is funded," he confirmed. $3.2 million exactly as promised. The wire cleared yesterday. It is now sitting in a high-yield account completely 100% untouchable by anyone but you. The developers have taken possession of the former property. The demolition is, as I understand it, complete. I nodded. I had deliberately not driven by. I didn't need to see the rubble. I had made my peace with it. "Good," I said. "That's good."